Welcome back. Today we're in the garden and it's time to prune the tomatoes. I can't hardly believe I'm saying that because it seems like we just planted these guys yesterday, but they're getting tall and a little bit unruly. So today we're going to come in here and we're going to prune them up. So the first thing that you need for pruning tomato plants are some scissors, and they need to be good and clean and sharp. And you want to sanitize your scissors in between prunings. So when you get done pruning tomatoes today, we're going to take these inside and clean them with hot soapy water to disinfect them, dry them off well, and store them. And I won't use these for anything else this season. The thing is, we don't want to spread disease between one plant and another, so we're going to keep it clean and use good pruners. So grab your pruners or scissors, and then the next step is to look for anything that's touching the ground, because that's going to introduce disease to your plant. So you can see right here, we've got a branch that's touching the ground. So we're going to snip that off. Now we've actually got a few here around the ground, so we're going to get all of those, and you want to get in as close to the stem as you can when you snip. And we're going to just go all the way around. Remove all of those pieces. Don't leave them in the garden to create disease and rot. Put them in the compost. And remember, tomato plants are toxic to chickens. So if you feed your chickens garden scraps, don't give them your tomato plants. So the next thing we're going to do is look for any signs of disease. So in this plant, we look pretty good, but here at the bottom, you can see these leaves got a little bit of sunburn when we first transplanted this plant into the garden. The top leaves look good and healthy. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and take that leaf off as well, or that branch. So we'll snip it right off. And then over on this side, we've got something going on here that is kind of our next step in the pruning process. Let me just kind of get our plant to turn and cooperate. So if you see, we have our main stem that runs all the way up the plant. And then we have our branches that come off the sides of the plant, off the sides of the stem. And then there in between this branch and the stem, we have something growing. We call these suckers because suckers are sucking the nutrition right out of your fruit production process. So we pull those off. Now, if you're growing determinate tomatoes, you may want to let the suckers stay, because determinate varieties are made to kind of bush out but stay generally small and compact. If you're growing an indeterminate variety like this one, then you are going to want to prune to kind of train the vine where you want it to go, because this plant will grow wild in all directions unless you train it. And you can introduce a lot of disease if there's a lack of airflow. So we're going to come in here and we're going to trim out any suckers we see. And again, anything too close to the ground. So I see a sucker right here. We have our main stem, we have our branch, and then right there, it's kind of in the armpit, that's our sucker. And you can pinch them out. They're very easy. Now here's a little trick to know about suckers from tomato plants. You can actually take this little piece of your plant and put it in a glass of water and just submerge the bottom and part of the stem, and it will actually grow roots. Put it in a sunny window and change the water every day or two just to keep it clean and fresh. And within a few weeks, you're going to see a bunch of little roots develop, and you will have a clone of the original plant. So that's how you can get free plants. Save your suckers, root them out, and now you've got free plants to use or share or sell. So there's a little tip. And then we're going to come in and just check at each branch all the way up. No sucker there. Here's one we need to remove. And we work our way all the way to the top. And once we get it completely cleaned up, the last step is just to make sure our plant is well supported. And this looks pretty good. We are using some twine just to hold it up until it gets tall enough to reach the trellis. And so I just gently wrap the twine around the stem to give it support. And then once it reaches the trellis above it, we'll be able to tie it to the trellis there, and it will be a little more sturdy. But that's how we prune tomato plants. It's pretty simple. The biggest thing is you want to do it often. At least once a week, you need to come out and give your tomato plants a haircut. If you wait weeks and weeks between prunings, it will get really overwhelming. In pruning tomatoes today, I found a little bit of a problem. We have a plant here that has fallen over and started to vine sideways. And I thought I'd bring you along and we'll do a little tomato rescue together and try to save this plant. So overall, it actually looks really healthy. The color is great. The leaves are looking good. But we do have the issue of a stem that has kind of gone twisted. And this is what tomatoes will naturally do. If you do not vine them or trellis them up, indeterminate tomato plants will vine like this. So you can run them over arches and up trellises and all sorts of things. But if you leave them along the ground, they'll just keep spreading on the ground. The reason we tend to trellis tomato plants, and people always do this, is because you don't want your fruit laying on the ground or the bugs will eat it before you do. So we're going to have to very gently straighten this guy out. And we're going to remember to try really hard not to break the top. So it doesn't have to be perfectly straight, but we need it at least standing up and somewhat supported so that we can come in here and prune and clean up the mess. So I am wrapping gently, and we've got it about halfway. We're going to adjust this a little bit and tighten up our twine, give us a little more traction there. Really, this is almost tall enough to just tie to the bottom of the trellis. And you know what? That's what we're going to do. We're going to change our plan here. Pivot. I'll cut and pull her off. Okay. So instead of wrapping it, I'm actually going to just grab it at the top and gently straighten it up. And I'm going to tie it right here. We have some little blooms on it, so even though it's a little bit wobbly and a little bit crooked, it's still productive and healthy, and we can train it where it will stand back up straight. It's just going to take a little love, so that gets us a start. Still not quite tight enough though. Let's see. That's more what we want. We want it to stay all the way up. So here we go. We're going to tie this together. Maybe not. Twine issues here. Okay. There we go. That's better. All right, we've got him standing up. Let's kind of untangle the leaves. And let's see if we can clean it up. It's already looking better. So we're going to start at the bottom. I always start pruning at the bottom. We're going to remove anything touching the ground. So everything's going to be pointing a little strangely, and that makes it more confusing. But just follow your stem up and snip off anything you see on the bottom until you get probably at least a third of the way up the plant. I'm going to really go heavy on this one since it was vining out. I don't want energy wasted on lots of branches. We want fruit from this. This is a granny cantrell tomato plant. And then we'll check for suckers. We've got one hidden under here that we're going to snip out. And I think that's it. Still a little crooked, but what I'm going to do is let it kind of hang out here tonight. Get its balance back up about it, adjust, and I think it'll be all right. We should have some pretty tomatoes off this plant in a few months. So there's our tomato rescue of the day. All right, let's prune another plant together. And while we're doing it, let's talk for a minute about those suckers we were talking about. Why do you need to prune them off? Well, if you don't prune them off, those suckers will become another stem of your plant, really. And so what would happen is instead of having one main stem here, I would have a stem here and a stem here from this sucker. and a stem here from this sucker and a stem here. And what would happen is it's going to get really bushy and you're going to have a lot of stems full of branches competing for attention. Now, if you live in an area where you get perfect weather for growing tomatoes, you might be able to just run with it and let it bush out and do fine. But here in North Carolina, it gets very humid in the summer, and our area is very prone to blight, which will wipe out your tomato crop in a hurry. And the best way that we found to prevent it is to prune so that there's lots of airflow between the branches and the leaves, and there's room for the fruit to really develop. So we also plant our tomato plants very close together. They're about 18 inches apart. And so we have to keep them kind of pruned so that they don't smother each other out as well. So we go with one main stem per plant, and we prune weekly to ensure that that stem is strong and nothing's taking energy from it. So let's prune this one together. First thing, we're going to look what's touching the ground. Right away, we see a few things. There is a branch and a sucker. We're going to get it all at once. Clip that. That's kind of near the ground as well. Always remove your debris, remember. And you might see we've got some weeds here. This is some Carolina horse nettle, and it likes to grow everywhere in my garden. It's actually poisonous. So when you're pruning, it's a really good time to do some weeding as well. And try to get all that out and up. At least disturb the root systems as much as you can. So the best way to ensure your garden is healthy is to spend time there, and then you see these things and you can actually, work on it as you go. So here's our stem. We've got a good clean stem down here now. There's a branch. Honestly, it's got some damage on the ends. It's low. It's not serving much purpose. And there's a sucker growing right here. So we're going to take that off, and I'm going to go ahead and clip this branch off as well. Now this is a heavy pruning, but the truth is we really don't need any of the leaves down here to steal energy because the fruiting process is happening up here. You see where these little kind of blooms are starting to form? They're almost like little nodules here. This is going to be the flowers, and the flowers eventually become the tomatoes. And so that's where we want the energy to go, and that's why we're pruning this plant so heavily. So last few things, we're going to check for suckers. There's a few little ones here in the armpits, as we call it, between the stem and the branch. And remember to check all the way up to the top. And then let's talk for a minute about the top of your plant. So the top of your tomato plant is important, and you want to be very careful with it when you're pruning your tomatoes, because if you are growing an indeterminate variety of tomatoes, you don't want to cut the top of your plant off by accident. So if you're looking in this area and you're not really sure what's the stem and what's a branch and what's a sucker, don't remove anything. If you accidentally top your plant or remove the top, it won't grow up any further from that stem. The stem won't grow back. Now what can happen is the suckers that we were pruning off, a new sucker could grow and that could become a stem and the plant might live on. But it's going to set you back weeks and weeks in the process of your actual harvest. So you just want to be super careful never to cut the tops off of your tomato plants until you're really ready to finish your season. Now, if you're getting near the end of your growing season and your frost date is coming up quickly, your first frost of the fall or the winter, and you want your tomatoes to stop growing up and binding, but you want the fruit to come on, you can at that point top your plant and sort of force it to fruit and produce the tomatoes. And it's just kind of a way of coaxing the plant of where to spend its energy. Do you want to spend it on more leaves? Do you want to spend it on more fruit? And a lot of that depends on the time of the year. So this is kind of how we do it, how we prune our tomatoes. And I hope it's been helpful to you. If you have any questions about pruning, feel free to leave them in the comments. And as always, we thank you for watching. We hope you will like and subscribe and come back again tomorrow.